John William Moore was born April 16, 1837, in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania. John Moore certainly had some of the habits of highly effective people. He had the patience and discipline to hold on to things as he worked through them. He purchased more than 2,000 acres in an industry he knew. He just didn't precisely know what was beneath it. Not yet. What he purchased wasn't farmland or pasture. It was ultimately wealth. Millions of tons of coal sat just beneath the surface of the thousands of acres he acquired. Coal, deep, dark, and ready to feed the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution. The land would make him rich. The coke operations he built on it would make him powerful. And the money he left behind would one day become the estate at the heart of this entire story. Before the wills, before the adoptions, before the courtroom fights, there was the coal. Western Pennsylvania in the mid-1800s was a frontier of industry. The railroad was expanding, the steel industry was exploding, and coal, especially Connellsville region coke, was the fuel that made everything possible. John Moore wasn't just another operator, he was one of the independent coke kings. He built or held interest in Summit, Redstone, Mammoth, Wynne, and other small but lucrative coke works throughout Greensburg, Westmoreland County, and beyond. But the crown jewel was Mammoth Coke Works, a massive facility producing coke for foundries and steel mills throughout Pennsylvania. This wasn't modest money. It was serious wealth, multi-generational wealth. All that money, all those assets, all that industrial power would eventually flow to Irene Moore, along with her mother, who never remarried, as well as her brothers and sisters. John Moore received his early education in the common schools in Elders Ridge Academy. He took business courses at Iron City Commercial College and graduated in 1856. Early in life, he was extensively engaged in stack dealing across Westmoreland, Fayette, and Greene counties. Stack dealing in Pennsylvania. Coke production had nothing to do with cards or gambling. A coke stack refers to the tall oven structures used to convert coal into coke, the fuel that powered steel mills and railroads. Controlling stacks meant controlling output, and output meant money. During the industrial boom, men who could secure, purchase, or operate coke stacks gained leverage over steel buyers. They could decide who received product, at what price, and in what volume. Many deals were made not just on coal itself, but on rights to future production coming out of those stacks. When steel demand surged, the people who controlled stack output held the winning hand. John Moore attempted to retire from business in 1873 at age 39. He certainly could have, but ever the entrepreneur and likely buoyed by his early success, he continued investing in the coke industry. It's hard to walk away. He then formed a partnership with James Cochran, Solomon Keister, and James Hurst to manufacture coke at Summit Coke Works near Broad Ford, Fayette County, Pennsylvania. After 6 years in operation, he withdrew from this firm, purchased the Redstone Coke plant 3 miles south of Uniontown, and engaged in business with his brother, P.H. Moore, and Colonel J.S. Schoonmaker. 4 years later, in 1877, John Moore withdrew from this partnership to go it alone. He bought 2,000 acres of coal land in Mount Pleasant Township in 1879, where he built the Mammoth Coke Works and put more than 600 coke ovens into operation. In 1882, Irene Moore was born. John was 44 and his wife was 41. He upped the ante with his purchase of the Wynne Coke Works near Uniontown. Then in 1889, on August 23rd, he sold his entire operation to the H.C. Frick Coke Company for a substantial sum. This is the same Frick empire that consolidated production ahead of, and on behalf of, industrial titan Carnegie Steel. The reported sale price was $1,250,000. In today's value, that is the equivalent of more than $50 million. Not stock options, not future value, cash from a single industrial sale, $50 million modern dollars from coke, the fuel of the steel age. This wasn't modest family money. This was empire money, railroad money, steel money, industrial age money. But coke wasn't just profitable, it was also deadly. These coal ovens were massive structures that burned hot for days at a time. Workers operated inches from extreme heat. Coal dust, toxic gases, and machinery came with little to no safety regulation. Respiratory damage, cancer, and sudden accidents were common. Men inhaled coal particulates daily, scarring lungs and leading to chronic illness. Carbon monoxide exposure was constant. Burns and explosions happened when pressures built, or bricks failed. Management, not just laborers, breathed the same air. Protective equipment was nearly non-existent. Industrial medicine was primitive. Many men in Coke simply didn't live to old age, and so tragedy reshaped the Moore household. John William Moore died February 19, 1893, less than 3 years after selling his business. Irene Moore was 10 years, 10 months, and 9 days old. The emotional impact of her father's death became more evident as she aged. Through 3 marriages, a Gatsby-like pursuit of lifestyle, and years spent negotiating privilege, social pressure, and identity. It's okay to ask, at what cost did this wealth arrive? The kind of money that builds mansions, buys land, shapes social circles, and outlives the people who earned it was now in the hands of a child whose father could no longer guide her. This scale of wealth is why Irene's estate mattered, why her will mattered, why strangers in 1950 circled one another, drawn in, pushed out, suspicious, curious, threatened, demanding. When a fortune this large moves, it pulls people with it, willingly or not. Importantly to this podcast, the media covered it. The Moores were suddenly incredibly wealthy. Comfortably, securely, confidently wealthy. This sale was big enough to eliminate financial risk, transform the Moore family into upper-class socialites, allow the family to winter in Washington, D.C., support a beautiful home in Greensburg, place Irene into finishing schools and elite social circles, and fund charities, travel, and political connections. Irene was not born into generational wealth. She was born into nouveau riche money, but by the time she had reached adulthood, it functioned like old money. A question remains. Did she ever truly get a seat at the old money table in Washington? And that distinction matters, because when wealth becomes heritage, inheritance becomes destiny. And destiny is what eventually sparked the legal fight after Irene's death. The Moore fortune, with its industrial roots at the time of J.W.'s death, fell under the stewardship of her mother, Elizabeth Stauffer Moore. Elizabeth was socially prominent, civically active, well-connected in Washington, and the embodiment of turn-of-the-century womanhood. She was independent, influential, respected, and never remarried. Her life after John's passing revolved around Greensburg Society meetings, church charities, and high-level social circles. Accordingly, Irene grew up educated, cultured, well-traveled, surrounded by lawyers, bankers, judges, military officers, and political families. She knew her fortune and accepted her responsibility, if not her place in the world. Both women would come to live in a world that was privileged but pressured in the idiosyncratic ways that society expected and demanded of widowed women then and even now. Wealthy widowed women of her era were expected to preserve the estate and pass it to the right people. These were the key lessons Elizabeth Stauffer Moore also taught her daughter, which leads to one of our key questions later. Why did Irene Moore Lyon remove Dr. James Lyon from her will? Newspapers in 1951 reported the estate to be valued at $750,000 at the time, which translates to $9 to $10 million in today's dollars. Considering that Irene Moore, who had siblings and a mother, was able to preserve her share of the empire's holding through the Great Depression was no small feat. To understand the decision about the change in the will, we will want to connect Irene to her husband's and understand all the forces, whether they be emotional, financial, and social, that shaped her adulthood. By the time she was 31, Irene was wealthy, unmarried for a time, and socially visible, a pattern she was familiar with based on what happened in her childhood to her mother. Women in her position relied heavily on lawyers, doctors, bankers, trustees, military men, politicians, and other social alliances. Dr. Lyon was a distant figure at this point, but not an unfamiliar concept. He was always in orbit, connected to Auntie Ruth, connected indirectly to Foster as well. But Irene kept her social world tight. Her estate was curated, her life choices projected stability, even if her life was anything but. Yet complications appear throughout, again and again, over and over. Wash, rinse, repeat. Which is why the late life amendment to her will, one that removed Dr. Lyon completely and installed a trust, wasn't just unusual, it was suspicious. Something changed. Something influenced her. Did she make a decision rooted in emotion, conflict, or secrecy? We don't know the reason, not yet. But we do know this. The empire's wealth created a battlefield, and her amended will lit the fuse. The Koch-era fortune created by her father, John Moore, made everything worth fighting over. All that unfolds in later episodes, the courtroom battles, reversals, resentments, revelations, all trace back to the money forged in the coal seams beneath Mammoth Coke Works. To understand why Irene changed her will, we must understand the woman she became, her relationships, her decisions, her fears, her loyalties, because the amendment didn't just remove Dr. James Lyon, it removed continuity. It broke pattern. It defied the expectations of the time, and it won't make sense until we know her, truly know her. Let's do that next.